Hello everybody and welcome back to Crime Time with Connie. I am obviously Connie and hello. If you are new here, I sit down every week and I talk about a true crime case. If that is interesting to you, please hit the subscribe button. That way you can see my videos. This is Maxwell. He's my co-host. Sometimes he's just sitting at the bottom by my toes, but today he's happy. Anyways, let's just dive into today's case. If I were to say Satanic Panic, most of you will know what I'm talking about. In the 1960s, sex, drugs, and rock and roll were on the rise. The high-profile Manson cult killings were hitting the news. Satanic books were hitting the shelves. Blockbuster films like Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist left audiences going home to hide under their covers. Pastors on the television were warning parents that the devil was in town, meaning that board games like Dungeons and Dragons and listening to heavy metal made your children godless. The West Memphis 3 trial in 1994 caused even more of a satanic panic when they were accused of killing children as part of a satanic ritual. After almost 18 years in prison, the three entered an Alford plea and were released from prison in 2011. I know a lot of people believe they're guilty, they're not guilty. Today we are not going to be talking about the West Memphis 3. But today's case, we are going to talk about a case that is similar to the West Memphis 3 that happened right around the time of the Satanic Panic in the 90s. We are going to be talking about the murder of Rhonda Sue Warford and how her investigators allegedly might have used the narrative of Satanic Panic to put innocent men in prison. Rhonda Sue was born on September 10, 1972 in Louisville, Kentucky. She had 3 sisters and 1 brother growing up, and she graduated from high school in 1991. On Wednesday, April 1st, 1992, Rhonda was just hanging out with her friends in the Kroger parking lot. This is what teenagers did. They hung out in the parking lot, maybe drank a little, listened to some music, and just enjoyed each other's company. Rhonda would return home telling her mother that while she was out with friends, a man approached her in the Kroger parking lot, telling her that he wanted to marry her, that he wanted to have babies with her, and she did not like this harassment at all. Rhonda would leave her house again, and her family thought she was just returning to hang out with her friends again. She was wearing her white tennis shoes, her mom's red sweatpants, and a multicolored jacket. After not returning home, her parents began to worry. It was not like Rhonda to not call to say where she was or to not return home the next day. So they filed a missing persons report. 3 days later, Rhonda's body was found. About 50 miles away, 2 people were looking at a property in Brandonsburg. The 2 people thought that Rhonda's body was a mannequin. Just a FYI, most of the time, if you see a mannequin, it's probably not a mannequin laying in a field. Rhonda was laying face up, she was fully clothed, and she was deceased. The medical examiner said that Rhonda had many defensive wounds on her hands and fingers. She had about 11 stab wounds. She was stabbed at the base of her skull that severed her brain stem. They were able to recover hair not belonging to Rhonda that she had in her hand and on her sweatpants. When investigators talked to Rhonda's parents, her mother said that she believes her daughter dabbled into Satanism. Rhonda did have a tattoo of an inverted cross on her left clavicle. When investigators heard this, it definitely got their attention. Apparently, tattoos that are tattooed on the left side of the body symbolizes the reverse of Christianity. The inverted cross also symbolizes that too. I just want to say that I am not familiar with modern Satanism. The investigators learned from the family that Rhonda had a boyfriend for about 5 months. This was 22-year-old Gar Keith Hardin. And they became interested in Hardin along with his friend Jeffrey Clark. Jeff was about 21 years old at the time. Of course, they brought them in for interviews. They were separated. In Hardin's interview, they asked him when was the last time he saw his girlfriend. He said the last time he saw her was on March 29th when he came over to spend the night at her house. In Clark's separate interview, they asked him when was the last time he saw Rhonda. And he said the last time he saw her was in December of 91 at his trailer. The investigators wanted to know what was their alibi for the night of April 1st. They both said that they were together in Clark's trailer drinking beer and searching for his missing snake. Investigators were very interested in this too because allegedly they heard from peers that they worshipped Satan. The two men, Clark and Hardin, cooperated with police. They gave their saliva. They sat down for interviews. They even gave their blood and hair, and they gave pubic hair samples. Clark even told investigators that he drove Hardin back to his parents' house about 1 a.m. in the morning. They stopped at a gas station where Clark had bought cigarettes. Witnesses backed this up because Clark got an altercation, not like a physical altercation, but he was just yelling at some teenagers, and witnesses backed this up, seeing Clark at the gas station. And there was surveillance there, proving that Hardin and Clark were there to get cigarettes. They were about 50 miles away from Rhonda's body, where her body was discovered. Now, one of the hairs that was recovered from Rhonda's sweatpants under a microscope was similar to color Hardin's hair. Now, this was the 90s. It's not as advanced as today. So what that means is the hair was not proven to 100% be Hardin. Okay? It was just similar to the color of Hardin's hair. The police, of course, dusted Clark's vehicle and they found Rhonda's fingerprint. To investigators, they believed Clark was lying about the last time he saw Rhonda. Now, with fingerprints, they can last a very long time on an object. So, that fingerprint cannot prove that it was fresh from April 1st. He could still be telling the truth that it was from December of 91. Rhonda's mother also told investigators that the red sweatpants Rhonda was wearing were hers, and she let Rhonda borrow them that night after she washed and, of course, dried them. So, the hair that was recovered from the sweatpants must have been fresh, meaning that Hardin probably lied about the last time he saw Rhonda. Now, the lead investigator on this case, was a Louisville Metro Police Detective, Mark Handy. Now, he was assigned to be the lead investigator because Handy had a reputation for solving homicide cases quickly. He could obtain a confession like that. Now, that is a red flag, and I'm going to tell you why. Because if you, as a detective, have a reputation of getting confessions out of people quickly, that means you are probably a liar. You are coercing people to give false confessions. This happens a lot. Okay? That's not a good reputation to have, because once, good. Twice, okay. 3 times, it's a little suspicious. Anyways, moving on. Police recovered knives from both Hardin and Clark's homes. This was apparently not okay because Clark had told police he didn't have any knives in his home. So they think he's a liar. And they believe that these knives were cult related. And then investigators began questioning them about their involvement with Satan worship. Detective Handy reports that Hardin told him that he dabbled into satanic worship, that Hardin himself would sacrifice animals, and that he wanted to take it a step up and sacrifice a human. Investigators also recover a broken wine glass, but to them, they believed it was a chalice. You know, those vampire ones where you put your blood in and you drink it? Yeah, they believed that this broken wine glass was a chalice. So the knives with the chalice made them Satan worshippers. They also found a blood-stained handkerchief in Hardin's possession, and to investigators, they believed that this was him sacrificing animals, but Hardin told him that it was his blood, which it turns out to be his blood because he broke his wine glass, and when he picked it up, of course, he started to bleed, and then he wrapped it in his handkerchief, and that was the reasoning behind the blood on his handkerchief. But investigators did not believe it. They went along with the narrative of him sacrificing animals. So with all this evidence, on May 5th, 1992, Clark and Hardin were arrested for aggravated murder. It took a few years for the trial to start. Their trial started in February of 1995. By that time, a woman had came forward to investigators saying that another man confessed to her that he killed Rhonda. He told this woman that he met Rhonda that night, he took her away, they got into a fight, some kind of altercation, and she said she was going to prosecute him. This made him furious, and he snapped, and he just killed her. Investigators knew this, and they did not investigate this lead any further. They still continued to go after Hardin and Clark. One of the witnesses that took the stand was Clark's ex-girlfriend, and she testifies that Clark admitted to her that he was once involved with satanic worship. She testifies that he owned several knives and guns, and that he had an inverted cross tattooed on him. If you are going to testify that someone has a tattoo, you probably want to make sure that's 100% true, because Clark did not have a tattoo of an inverted cross on his shoulder like she claimed. He took his shirt off to prove that he didn't, and also there was not any markings to prove that he cut it off or had it removed somehow. She also testifies that Clark admitted that he wanted to see if he could get away with murder, that he explained to her how he could kill someone by stabbing the base of their skull. She also testifies that he took her to the areas where he sacrificed animals. Clark's ex-girlfriend, who's testifying all of this, we found out later that maybe the reason she is going against him is that Clark made a complaint where he said she allegedly sexually abused her son. And this was before the trial. She later would be prosecuted for those crimes. There was another witness. It was one of Rhonda's friends. And in this source, this was the only source where I saw this occurring. She said that Rhonda at some point was pregnant, and when she told Hardin, he allegedly said that he was going to kill her and the baby if she didn't take care of it. Allegedly, her friend also saw Rhonda cutting her finger and cutting Hardin's finger and putting it together. or just rubbing it on him. Allegedly, she also admits to meeting a man in the Kroger parking lot that night, and the man had the same name as the other woman, claiming that this man confessed to her that he killed Rhonda. A former co-worker of Clark's testified for the prosecution, saying that Clark would carry around a knife that he sacrificed animals with. Detective Handy would also take the stand, saying that Hardin told him, allegedly, he enjoyed sacrificing animals and he wanted to take it a step up and sacrifice humans. Detective Handy's whole angle was that these men, killed Rhonda in the act of a satanic ritual. A prison inmate testified, saying that Clark had told him in prison 2 times that he had killed Rhonda. The first time was kind of just joking, and then the second time he was serious. The Louisville police technician who dusted the fingerprint in Clark's car, this expert testifies that you cannot tell if a fingerprint is fresh or not. The forensic analyst who tested Rhonda's hair testified that the hair was not Rhonda's, but it had characteristics similar to Hardin's hair. Again, this is the 90s. DNA was still kind of unfamiliar. So to a jury, they think, oh, it has similar characteristics to Hardin, it must be him. Clark and Hardin would also take the stand to testify that they had no involvement in Rhonda's killing. They don't know who killed her. They don't know why, and that they never sacrificed humans or wanted to. They had no reason to kill Rhonda. Almost all of the witnesses said that they never saw Hardin or Clark dabble into Satan worshiping. On March 7, 1995, both were found guilty of Rhonda's murder. But prior to sentencing, they found a letter from the inmate claiming that Clark told him that he killed Rhonda. This letter was suspicious because it seemed like the inmate was lying to get a lesser sentence for himself. Maybe get out on parole quicker. The defense claims that the prosecution failed to disclose this information. The motion for a new trial was denied. 14 years later, in 2009, the Innocence Project plus Kentucky's Innocence Project sought out DNA testing for the hairs, but their motion was denied. Fast forward to 2013. Kentucky Supreme Court reversed the decision and ordered that the physical evidence in Rhonda's case should be released for DNA testing. In 2014, the hairs that were found on Rhonda were tested, and these hairs were not a match for Hardin, Clark, or Rhonda. Now, the handkerchief was tested, and it was Hardin's blood, like he said it would be. In 2015, lawyers for Hardin and Clark filed a motion for a new trial because based on the DNA testing that proves that they could be innocent, Detective Handy, stuff's been going on with him too. Like I said, had a reputation for getting confessions out of people so they go to jail, right? He's got a lot under his belt. He's got a reputation for it. Well, it caught up to him.
Former Louisville Police Detective Mark Handy was sentenced this morning. Dennis Ting was there.
Former Louisville Police Detective Mark Handy will serve 1 year in prison after pleading guilty in court this morning. Handy pled guilty to perjury and tampering with evidence, with each count carrying a penalty of 1 year of prison to be served at the same time. Handy was accused of lying on the stand, with his testimony in this case responsible for sending Edwin Chandler and Keith West to prison for murder. Handy's team had entered in a guilty plea last year that would have let Handy avoid jail time, but the judge rejected that agreement.
A little trickiness comes in. So back in 2014, Hardin admitted to the parole board that he had remorse for killing Rhonda. This is common for people to do in front of the parole board. You're more likely to be released from prison if you show remorse for the crimes you committed. And Hardin felt like if he just confessed, that he could be out of prison, even though he knew that he did not commit this crime. The judge acknowledged that Hardin did this, but he knows what we know, that Hardin likely did this so he could have freedom again. In August 2016, both men were released from prison. Prosecutors were trying to appeal this decision to get a new trial for kidnapping. And in September of 2016, they were re-indicted, charged with kidnapping and perjury, lying under oath at a parole board. But in January of 2018, the judge dismissed all charges. So now we are going into final thoughts. Two men, Hardin and Clark, were sent to prison because a detective used the narrative that was very popular at the time to send them to prison so his reputation could look good. He said that Hardin confessed to him that he was tired of sacrificing animals and wanted to sacrifice a human now. That was false. One of my sources said that Hardin did admit to, at one point, dabbled into the modern Satanism. I'm not familiar with it, but I know that modern Satanism does not sacrifice animals or humans or anything with blood. Again, I'm not familiar with it. Detective Handy also told Hardin that he failed his polygraph. That way he could get a false confession out of him. In the eyes of the law, two men were found guilty, so a bad seed of an investigator could have another conviction under his belt. Hardin and Clark spent over 20 years in prison for a crime they did not commit. The saddest thing about this case is that Rhonda's killer has never been found, and her case is still unsolved. Rhonda's family needs answers, and Rhonda needs justice. The witness that came forward to say that a man confessed to her about killing Rhonda, the investigators knew this, and they did not investigate. He could have been behind bars sooner. Who knows if he went on to kill other women, or men, or children. Now, they did give the name of the person. I could not find any information about this man, but he did have a history of violent crimes, robbery, harassment, and he may have killed Rhonda. Hopefully soon, Rhonda's case can be closed, and justice will be served for her and her family. But that is it for today. I hope to see you guys soon. It is spooky season. It's October. Anyways, I hope you guys stay safe and stay golden.